it looks like finally the last people who can't bear to leave the sunshine are trickling back into the whare. So thanks all of you for sticking around for this last part of the conversation on a beautiful Friday afternoon. The weather hasn't changed. It's Wellington, I thought, for sure, halfway through the day. That's right, it's amazing. So our last part of the day is talking about what next for critical and generative care economies research. My name is Katharine McKinnon. Okay. My name's Katharine McKinnon, and for those of you that don't know me, I'm a recent returnee from Australia. Landed back in Wellington in January this year and have been working up the hill at Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University. I'm originally from Wellington, but have a somewhat scattered story of being born in Fiji and growing up in Thailand and then coming to New Zealand and then going back to Thailand and then, back to Australia. So lovely to be back here, and thanks to Kelly and the team for hosting this wonderful day here. I came to care research partly due to Kelly, actually. I started being interested in care when care became a really prominent part of my life as I was becoming a mother. And becoming a mother and being an academic, and getting really interested in the politics of care and birthing and mothering work. And as I started to form a research project around that, Kelly came in, and also Stephen Healy joined that work as well. So my engagement with these wonderful ideas of care that we're talking about today is really thanks very much to Kelly and to Stephen, who's been here for much of the day as well. I wanted to maybe start the afternoon session with some reflection. So Kelly gave me the job of being the rapporteur for the session. I have no idea what that word means, and I looked it up, and apparently, according to Google, the job of a rapporteur is to give a fully factual and accurate report on the proceedings, so that everything is captured completely accurately. That's not what I'm going to do. But as the day has progressed, there's been so much, it's been so rich. I don't really think there's any way to kind of capture where all the conversations have gone and what all the presentations have been about. But something that's been coming to my mind a lot as I've been listening and taking notes, I keep thinking about trees. And so I wanted to share with you a little story about trees. And trees have been coming to mind partly because our day began with a pōwhiri and the reference to the kōwhai tree that was planted here when this building was first thought of, and is clearly an important part of the life of what this building is. And the other reasons why trees have been coming up will probably become apparent with the story. So I've had the great privilege while I was in Australia to work as part of a project called Country as Teacher, which was about trying to train Australian school teachers to bring in Indigenous pedagogies into the classroom and to teach their students how to connect with country as a part of classroom practice. And so being part of that project, the team that didn't already have that practice, i.e. me, had to go and spend time regularly on country, on the land. The idea was to choose one place, preferably in a natural setting, where we would sit at least once a week for at least 40 minutes and just try and figure out how to learn from country in that place, how to listen, how to open ourselves to what the stories that were being presented. And this is a practice that I stuck with, and it was a lot of just sitting there wondering what I was meant to be thinking about or seeing or doing. But there was one moment that came, and it was in a time in my life where the burden of care was feeling really heavy. Most people in this room can relate to what that's like. I've got 3 children, a couple of them with some really complex needs, and I was dealing with long COVID and was just feeling like I was being eaten away, like, you know, constantly being asked, being needed to do stuff, and, you know, feeling that exhaustion. And there's been talk today about that feeling of exhaustion that happens with the burden and obligation of care work, and as a care burden that's carried nationally by Māori in this country in terms of treaty relationships. That exhaustion of care work and the obligations gets held at many different scales. So for me, it was being held very much in my body at that time. And I was sitting in my usual spot, which was at the base of a big gum tree in the bush next to my house in Victoria, and just had one of those slightly incoherent moments where I kind of felt like I was seeing the land in front of me from the perspective of the tree, and feeling like I lived in a tiny miner's cottage, you know, built in the 1850s. And I felt like I was I was seeing the country through that time period where you know, what did it look like before that house was there? What did it look like before the miners came? What was the bush like? And I had a sense really of how transitory that human existence on that land is, and how long lived and ancient the land itself is. And felt a real sense of the strength of that tree behind my back. And as I was sitting there with these reflections, a seed pod fluttered down from the tree into my lap. And it was that moment of, here I am feeling in this care burden like I'm giving pieces of myself away all the time, and I'm being diminished somehow by that work, that unrecognized, unappreciated, bloody teenagers, work. And here, you know, I felt like the seed pod was a little moment where I was being told, there's a different way to do it. You can actually, I'm the age when a couple of generations ago I would have been a grandmother already. I would have been that old woman, you know, sitting strong in the kitchen telling everyone what to do. You can be that. You can be that strong tree, and what you give to the world, what you give through your care, can be the seed pod, can be that thing you give it. You're giving the koha. Thank you for the reference to koha in the work. It can be that gift. It doesn't have to diminish you, right? And that was a bit, in that moment in my life, that was a big kind of, I can do this in a different way. It doesn't have to be taking from me. And thinking with the tree and the work of care, there's more to it as well, because the tree has its roots and those foundations in the soil. And through those roots, a tree is in community with other trees. We know about the forest as a community that speaks to each other and supports each other and warns each other about incoming pests, right? So through those roots, we are also getting strength from the community around us. And that's another way to think about the work that we're doing here, I think, is that work of being in community with each other as we think about the work of care and the importance of care. The other theme that connects with that story in my mind is the theme of time that's come up so much. The long-lived nature of country and the long life of a tree, and the very different kind of time scale that we're talking about. It's not the Georgian clock. It's the time that's needed in the moment to listen and to just be. And that's been a really beautiful theme that's been coming up through the day today, that different way of thinking about time. It's a pretty radical way of thinking about time. It's a very anti-productivist kind of a narrative of what we are and what we do. the seed pod doesn't get produced according to the publisher's deadline or anything. It comes in its own time, and it flourishes in its own time. It's not something you control either. So when we're talking about all of that hard, boring work of sitting in Senate hearings and trying to make policy happen, that's another different way of thinking about that time as well. There's been talk of reworlding, which is a really beautiful language to think about lightening that burden of decolonisation and lightening that how we think about the importance of care in that, a reclaiming. There's the intergenerational nature of care that we've been talking about today, and when you think of it in a time scale of trees, you are already thinking in an intergenerational time scale. And there's thinking about love and aroha, which I think is really crucial in this conversation about care as well. That project that I mentioned with Kelly and Stephen, one of the stories that came out of that was a story about the importance of love in childbirth. That when birthing is happening, it happens through the chemical imprint of love, of oxytocin. The human is made to be born in and through the chemical imprint of love, and I feel like that's a really important thing to hold. For me, love and care is at the foundations of everything. That what Joan was talking about is care is not, it's not the care economy as a little sector. It's in and through everything all the time, and it's a foundation, that ought to be one that we approach with and through love, a praxis of aroha, I think. And I think that runs through the wonderful 6 what we can do priorities that Joan pointed to at the start of the day, which are really helpful to think with. So that's my rapporteur's account of the day. It's the account of a tree. Time and love and roots and community and slowness. Trees are really good at teaching how to go slow and listen. So with that in mind, I'd like to pass on to our beautiful panel here to give their thoughts and reflections on the day. And then the room is very quiet and feeling, so I might actually get everyone to have a little bit of movement and bring some energy back into the room before we go to questions at the very end. So I'll pass. Who would like to speak first?
Thank you. That was a great rapporteur. Is that what it's called? Yeah, that was a great rapporteur account of the day, and beautiful story about the tree and the seeds. And yeah, it was a lovely way to capture all of that kōrero. So thank you very much for that. It was a tiny surprise that I was speaking because I need to read things a little better. And so I'm just off the seat of my pants. I'm just going to talk. So that's good. And since it's around the next steps for research, I'll kind of talk through how I'm moving forward and thinking about what my priorities are in terms of the space, how I want to impact, how I want to contribute. And be of use. So I'm not good at many things, but I can read, write and think pretty okay, I think. So I'm just use that. And then one of the 4 Indigenous scholars in particular, we don't have, our literatures are woven into the landscape. And so we don't have a huge wealth of written text to draw on. And so our job as Indigenous scholars is to theorise so we can utilise. If we don't write about our text that is in the land and in our cultural archives, then it's not seen as valid in the Western Academy. And so that's a key priority, is to put it onto paper so that we can utilise it. I'm really grateful at the Winter Intensive for the Diverse Economies course that I did a few months ago, that I got to meet Kelly, and she helped me through putting together a proposal for a mana tuapapa, which there was hundreds and hundreds of applications, and like 20 we'll get through. So very small chance of getting through, and it's also a ballot. So, but I was able to really sculpt what some of these things that I'm interested in investigating around community economies, and really think about what mokopuna-centric wellbeing economies and care economies look like, and think really deeply about the nucleus. Where is the kernel that we need to put our attention on to see change? And we kind of use the word upstream and downstream all the time for where it's located, but you're kind of like running upstream and then downstream and upstream to try and find how the things that we're doing are reaching. So my main priority, because I only came out of my PhD a couple of years ago, is write, and think, and really flesh out all of those concepts around the mokopuna-centric economies, what that looks like. Look at, I've got some child development models that I'm moving around with that find a home there as well, and also an ecology of love that looks at a new way of thinking about well-being. We have our wonderful wharetapa whā, which has been used, everyone uses it. It's been very useful for what it's been used for, and I'm so grateful for that model. And it's a time now to move beyond and think of it a little bit deeper. I'm particularly interested in how we reconcile our Indigenous bodies with land. So the separation of mind and body is something that I think about constantly, and how that Cartesian dualism that has been imposed on us has interrupted our connection to land in really tangible ways. So if we thought about Indigenous bodies as one, Indigenous bodies, minds, as one with the land and as one with the environment, what does that look like? What does that feel like? Because that separation, that individualization in that way has been incredibly detrimental to who we are. And so that reconciliation is there, and thinking about well-being through our elements, and I kind of had another slide but ran out of time today, through wind and air and the land and water, and how we come about being well through connecting to these things. I think I'll leave it there, otherwise I'll be here all day just nattering on and my stuff that I think about on a daily. But I'll pass it over to Ash. Yummy.
Thanks, Joni. Thank you very much. I guess my thoughts, following on from what Katharine alluded to earlier, is thinking about notions of time. Time is a crucial resource that we all have far too little of, and the way in which our work and lives structure the kind of time we have for care, the time we might, Joan talked about this idea of a caring democracy, that we all ideally should be able to take part in both the decision making around how care happens, who should be responsible for that care, how it's shared, really higher level questions as a society moving forward, how we think about care needs and how care is provided and sourced. But when I was thinking about that, I was thinking about it through the lens of the families who are involved in the research that I'm about to embark on with colleagues I've mentioned already, who are families working in non-standard hours, particularly low-income families, where the majority of non-standard work at the moment is families who are on low-wage income. It's increasingly precarious. It's shift in the last decade. Shift night work has increased twice as much for women as their male counterparts in New Zealand. And by the recent statistics, about 1 in 3 workers are involved in some kind of non-standard labour. So I was thinking about the ways in which we might try and claim back some unburdened time from that encroaching nature of the sort of work environment that we're increasingly involved in, the kind of habituation we have to a 24/7 economy now. When we talk about that kind of nothing's out of bounds in some ways in terms of our demands, and how we might police that. We're told as individuals we're supposed to be able to police that, but we're increasingly lacking the autonomy or the agency to do that for all sorts of reasons. And so the notion of time for me seems to be something we need to try and, I guess, contest, repoliticize. I was thinking about the way in which at the turn of the 20th century, you know, we fought hard for the 8-hour working day and the kind of advocacy that went into claiming those kinds of rights around time and autonomy. The proliferation of the idea of leisure time is something that was democratized in a way that hadn't been until that point, that everyone had the right to have these periods of unburdened time, but it seems to have kind of slipped from our understandings. And it's not just for necessarily, it's particularly pointed for the kinds of families in the study that I'm involved in. But I think it impacts right across the board. And I think the kind of work from home movement, although it's supposed to give us greater agency about how we structure our days and our responsibilities, in fact, with the kind of cost of living rises, what we're seeing is families cutting things like after school care and childcare, trying to do everything in the sort of working day. So that, you know, they've got these images in the media of women with their laptops and kids just beside them, you know, looking for their afternoon tea or whatever it is. So, you know, we're led to believe we have this agency over our time and that we're able to structure time to do care, but actually, in reality, how feasible is that for most of us going forward? So notions of time were sort of really prominent in my thoughts today as I was listening to Joan. And the other thing that struck me when I was thinking about it, maybe from a sort of geographer's perspective, is the kind of materialities of the spaces in which we inhabit and the way in which that infuses notions of care. So, you know, I think about the ways, and I was struck by a colleague's comment recently who started at Massey, and this might be a reflection badly of Massey, but she talked, we'll go with it anyway. She said that, you know, I feel like the buildings are really run down and I just don't feel like we're loved. I just don't feel like the institution cares for us. Don't record this, Diana, thanks very much. I'm on thin ice. And it really struck me as I never thought about it. And she was right. I was looking really tired. And, you know, in what ways do the sort of materialities of the environments we inhabit also express and make conditions for care to happen? It might be, you know, the aged care sector where we might go into some of those providers and services and feel like they're stark, cold, they're unloved, they're not loving, they're not caring environments. I see through the eyes of a sort of early childhood education and childcare, which is where I do a lot of my previous work, particularly as we started bringing in those different kinds of values, profit making being the key one in many ways. You know, those, the materialities of how care gets facilitated in many ways through the built environment. And the other thing that struck me recently was I'm seeing a lot of these kind of city initiatives about caring cities, and I wondered about the scale at which we kind of invest our time and energy to try and reframe care. You know, it might be a planning initiative where people are trying to reframe care as a caring city. I follow a lot of media around playful cities in terms of making cities more amenable to children and how we make it more interactive and engaging, not just the kind of utilitarian adult-centric spaces that we necessarily have to have some of, but how do we open up those spaces in ways that make life and well-being better for all kinds of citizens who might inhabit those spaces. So I just wondered about, the materialities, the spaces, and the levels at which we pitch our advocacy for change, in a sense. So there are things I was thinking of today.
I just returned from China. I was there a couple of weeks ago, and every time I go, I'm always struck by how fast everything is in the city, how fast everything is, and how everything's always available. And, you know, I had my son with me who's 11, because the kids get one trip when they turn 11, come on a work trip with me. And, you know, he was fascinated by robots, because there's a lot of robots. And anything he wanted, my host, who had previously been my PhD student, would order it on like the equivalent of Deliver Easy, and then robots could bring it to him, an iced tea, a single cup of, iced tea. It was just so bizarre. You could buy Pokemon from these robots that were kind of like fridge sized and just going through the mall, accosting small children. And it was kind of an embodied feeling of like sort of like a bit of panic for me as someone coming from Palmerston North, which is very quiet. And it was so, I really, just hearing what you're saying about the 24/7 economy, like that was totally embedded throughout the city. And even Abby and Stephen were wanting somewhere to print something at 9 p.m. the other night for our thing that started the next morning. And I was like, I don't think New Zealand does that. It's like, what, do we have print shops? I don't know. They're definitely not open at 9 p.m. Yeah, they'll close at 2:30 or something. So just connecting with what you're saying there, and that sort of, so your work is so important to think that through. Do we want that kind of economy? And it's actually, as Georgie said, it's the economy's designed and our spaces are designed and we can design them differently. And this whare is also Massey University, which has been designed with care and is looked after with care, and we're welcomed on with care. And, these are the kinds of spaces of slowness and of reflection that we want to have in our city. And so a lot of my, Chinese students come to Palmerston North, and it's, maybe Hao-Yun can guarantee this for us, but it's very boring. And in fact, the Spanish women's football team left Palmerston North because it was too boring. And I said to my children, only boring people get bored. If you've got something in here to sit with, you can make a quiet space your own. Anyway, that wasn't what I was going to say. I was just reflecting on what you said. What next for caring economies? So 3 things I got out of Joan's talk that I wanted to reflect back to us, and you might have got different things. I'm sure we all did. I was thinking about her distinction between the care economies and caring economies, and it was very flattering that she kind of attributed that to, that was a paper that we co-wrote, it wasn't just me, but I don't know if we'd really thought about that. That idea of when people talk about the care economy, they're talking about it as a subset of the economy. So it was interesting to have her bring that to our attention, and how the idea of caring economies, which I think we use in the plural mainly because we're geographers and we're so insistent that place matters, that there's not just one economy. It's like place-based economies. So we talk about it in the plural often, and diverse economies literature as well talks about it in the plural. So that was really something for me to take away and think about more intentionally. How do we use that language and, push back against that assumption that care is a part of the economy, and think about, as Katharine said, that care is the foundation of human life. It was first, and it will continue, and it will always be there, and it is always there, no matter the kind of economy that emerges to help us distribute resources and organise ourselves, right? And I love the piece that you wrote where you talk about that as we're all born into those networks of care, and that's the foundation of a new geopolitics, but also of a different kind of economy, The second thing she talked about was assessing the caring effects of policies. I really like that. I think that's a job for next We All report. She talked about that we should assess the effect of policies according to their care, and people should have care impact statements in policy design. And I think that, that's something I can't quite see how it would happen at this point. But there is things that have changed around that, environmental impact statements and social impact statements that are, required in different kinds of consents, resource consents, and there's a place for bringing that up. I mean, the wellbeing budget is an example of trying to assess the impact of how Treasury spends the money for the country according to the wellbeing outcomes. So that's definitely something that we should bring back. But assessing the caring effects of policies like Ash's work, and thinking about childcare policies. If we're pouring subsidies into private childcare, what are the caring effects of that? And should we have a balanced approach that's putting money into families who want to be at home to care for children, or should we have, what kinds of caring effects are there in the different policy options that we come up with? So I love that as a practical step. And then the third one, Joan's a political theorist, so it was kind of interesting to me I'm always like, the economy needs to change. The economy is the problem. If we change the economy, because I research in the area of community economies, so the problem is the economy. But she was like, political institutions need to change, and that was her start point as a political theorist. And I was like, those things aren't disconnected, right? Like Mataki Mai, for example, is a constitutional document, is about political change, but it has deep economic implications. And I think one of the things that struck me as she said that was a sense of empowerment, just because, weirdly, but that, politics is about action and about change and about doing things differently. And I believe the economy is too, and economies are too, but that's often not the way that people think about it and talk about it. As Georgie said, we often think of it as a machine where things just happen and we're not kind of part of it, and it's sort of done to us. So that was something I would take away to think about. And then the last thing I wanted to say was that, this event has been funded. Weirdly, it doesn't cost $25 a head to run. It's been funded by Ash's Marsden grant, which was a social science grant, which they've just discontinued. We're on the last, hopefully not the last, but recently the last, and on her project, and through my project, which is a Rutherford grant, which is called Transitioning to Caring Economies through Transformative Community Investment. And then, so the three things that I've been working on for the last 3 years, and I've got another 2 years left, that was inventorying what we already do. What are we already doing in the space of caring economies? And looking at recovery in Christchurch after the earthquakes. We recently did a project documenting all of the incredible projects in the Wellington region. It's called A Field Guide to Wellington Transitions. And so that's sort of inventorying what's already out there and what people are already doing that's, that looks like the kind of caring economy that we want to be part of in the future. And then amplifying the one. Inventory includes bad stuff too, obviously. But amplifying the ones that we want to see more of. And that's about creating outputs, such as the book that Transitions project came out of. But also thinking about metrics and thinking about the event we had yesterday on circular economy was actually called Measuring Circular Economy, and we got people who knew stuff about measuring, which I don't, to talk about the impact of measuring and how measuring can guide action. And even if you don't like measuring, it often guides action. So how do you, as a measuring skeptic, get involved in designing metrics? Because actually your skepticism is what is your gift to that. And then the third part of the project is connecting or travelling. Connecting rather than scaling up, because I'm always like, how do these community things scale up? Rather than scaling up, connecting between initiatives that can learn from each other. And so that's part of Swanema's project, where she's working with her organisation, Chinhari, and then also working with Te Hiko and Porirua, which Thomas has also been helping out there as well. And how do these ideas travel across place and across time in ways that are appropriate to kind of seed and spark caring economies in other places? Yeah, that's where I'll leave that.
We do have another one, but I've lost it.
I've got it.
Oh,
I've got both.
Hoarding. So thanks very much, all of you, for your reflections. We have... Oh, what time are we meant to finish up?
4:15.
There's only 5 minutes left. We must have talked for a long time. Sorry, I wasn't timekeeping. I was going to get everyone to like stand up and move. Well, let's just everyone stand up anyway for a moment. Yeah, so we've got time for a few comments and questions. So as you're standing up and shaking your limbs and moving around, have a think of anything that you'd like to bring up, pose to any of the panel, or any general comments or reflections on the day that you want to share yourselves. All right, we can sit back down maybe.
Hey, kia ora. Thank you so much for a great day. It's been awesome. My name's Rosie. My background is in sleep science and aged care, and I think it's been really great to hear, talking about, the use of time and how time can be compromised. So in theory, sleep occupies a third of our time, and the rest is kind of work and play. And so what we tend to see in the qualitative work that Mary and I have done with people in aged care and dementia-related care is there's a real unique awareness that sleep is really important, and that really aligns with what we know, when sleep is compromised. This has real implications for physical and mental, spiritual well-being. But also there's these narratives around it's kind of the only epoch of time that can be sacrificed and often is truncated for carers because they have these obligations for their employment or their caregiving, or they're literally sleeping on high alert. So even if they are asleep, they consider themselves caring. Just wanted to kind of plant that seed that it's something that is quite often forgotten. We take sleep for granted, but it's for carers we increasingly see that there's real disparities in sleep health, which has implications for well-being and being able to be productive in work as well as caring. So just planting that seed of people doing research in that space that we're really interested in that third epoch of life. Yeah, so kia ora. Thank you for today.
Kia ora, thank you. I've actually got to rush off and take some baking to my daughter's workplace. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you so much. I was thinking about care as koha, and I met so many people today and look around the room and I think what amazing things you all hold in your hands, and that concept of time again, taking time, slowing down time, and there's a lot of work on slow academia. How grateful I am for you for organising this, to give us the time to think carefully and to think through care, but also to connect and to think of ways in which we can act as well. So as someone who struggles to think how we can care outside of consumption, as you talked about, Kelly, I leave today feeling that there is hope. And that's another thing I think a lot about in my academic work. What does it mean to give our students hope? What does it mean to hold hope in our hands and to enact it in a really practical way? So you've all given me so much to think about, and I am very, very grateful for that. So kia ora. I have to go.
She's leaving work and I promise.
Kia ora, I just had a thought, and I'd love to hear your reflections on it, Joni, about how, you're saying we need to write this stuff down, and the kind of oral tradition hasn't been really valued in the Western academy, but thinking about kind of historically, ancient Greece, whatever, it's if you're writing things down, I was talking to Kelsey about this at lunch, I think, if you're writing things down that wasn't really trusted, and it's if you actually can speak, and then you can be questioned, then that's something that was valued more at that time. And now I'm just thinking with the move to AI, and anyone can say anything, and now I hear you're having more oral assessments, and I don't know. I just wondered what you thought about it.
Oh, that's such a good question. Yeah, it is a really real challenge because AI, I guess we haven't quite come to terms. I mean, I got a little bubble of anxiety as you were talking. Like I felt like this, ooh, as you were like saying it, so I feel like we've all kind of got that tiny bit of like not knowing the implications of what that means. And for Indigenous knowledge, what does that mean? You can ask AI anything and it will tell you something about, our worldview. So I feel like there's still a need to write about it from human beings getting it onto a piece of paper and talking and getting it on there. There's still a need we need to talk about it. We need to be able to communicate it, through poetry as, pathways, talk about it, discuss it, and then also have these, literatures that carry it as well, that come from humans too. And so kind of I love that idea of the making part of it too. Like I'm drawn to creativity, art, and the interweaving of that as a way to infuse the humanity into our mahi as well. So if we can hold on to that, we can hold a little bit onto our humanity. But yeah, I still feel like there's just this really important drive for Indigenous scholars to get it on paper so that we can use it. Because I can't use it if it's not there, and others can't use it if it's not there. We have all of these ways of doing research, for example, and we have nothing written about it. We just do it and then still, Brown and Clark it, that just Brown and Clark 2006 at every single time, But we have our own ways of analysing data, and I do it, but there's no literature to support how I do it. And so our job is, I'm like creating a data analysis ceremony with a couple of my like homegirls that also do this mahi so that we can use it. Otherwise it will just still be like Brown and Clark forevermore until we get it. Yeah.
Thanks so much. And if I want to make a plug for the importance of the communication work, the writing that you were talking about, also the comms that you were talking about, the Wheel resources online, trying to find stuff to present to our students when we're teaching and give them different perspectives that go against the grain, that are digestible for them. Those Wheel videos are just gold. Yeah. And, looking for more of those materials that we can share in our teaching spaces as part of our academic work is really crucial. Yeah. We're at time. And I'm really conscious that it's a Friday afternoon, and this has been such a beautiful day and this lovely space, and I'd love to keep the conversation going, but maybe we'll call the formalities to an end and perhaps there's progression to further conversations after. So I want to thank everyone who's spoken today. Thank Kelly and Aish for organising and putting your precious grant money into making this happen. And everyone for participating. It's been really lovely. I think there's been a lot of seeds shared today to take with us in the work that we're doing. And hopefully we will be able to get in touch with each other if emails and things are distributed. Yeah. So please join me in thanking everyone for this wonderful day.